Hello and welcome to Fear Noir. Before we begin, take a moment to leave a comment and let me know where you're listening from. I always enjoy reading them. If you love slow, unsettling stories that softly pull you deeper into the darkness, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Now, make yourself comfortable, let your body grow still, and allow the sounds of the outside world to gently fade into silence. Tonight, the shadows have a story waiting for you. So close your eyes, listen carefully, and let yourself drift into Fear Noir. Story 1. I really need your help. I have been an explorer for the last 5 years, and in all that time I can honestly say I have never come across anything like what I found recently. I have explored abandoned train stations in Japan, forgotten houses swallowed by nature, and even old World War II bunkers left to rot in silence. Adventure has always been a part of me. It feels like it runs in my blood. The town of Hellbourne is the kind of place that seems to breathe legends. If you truly love exploring, then you know the feeling. The urge to throw on your backpack, grab your camera, and walk straight into a place people call cursed. The moment I heard the stories surrounding that town, I knew I had to see it for myself. So I rented a small apartment on Alphabet Street, which still sounds like a strange name for a street even now. For the first few days, I spent my time speaking with local residents. I recorded short interviews, listened carefully to every story, and slowly pieced together the dark history of the place. Again and again, one location kept coming up in every conversation: an old psychiatric colony for women. According to the locals, it had been founded in the early 2000s. It was supposedly run by nuns and was meant to care for women of all ages who were struggling with mental illness. In the beginning, people believed it was a place of healing. Families trusted it. They believed their daughters, sisters, and mothers were being looked after. But everything changed in 2007. That was when the investigation happened. The way the locals spoke about it was almost like they were afraid to even say the words out loud. Bodies, blood, babies. Behind the religious image and the promises of care, something far darker had been hidden. The women inside had not been treated as human beings. They had been used. Their bodies had been turned into nothing more than vessels, kept alive for one horrifying purpose: to carry unborn children that would later be sold. Some people whispered even worse things. They said in the darkest cases, bodies were cut apart and sold piece by piece. Even after hearing many terrible things during my years of exploring abandoned places, this story hit me hard. Human cruelty has no limit, especially when money is involved. The entire place had hidden its evil behind prayer, white walls, and the image of helping those in need. But beneath all that was something rotten. Naturally, my curiosity got the better of me. I had to go there. The next morning, I packed my gear: a sturdy backpack, a small medical kit, ropes, a few granola bars, a flashlight, and a knife attached to my belt. If there is one thing I have learned from years of entering abandoned places, it is this: never go in without something to defend yourself. I learned that lesson the hard way, after once running into someone inside an abandoned building who was far from friendly. He left a scar on my arm that I still carry. But that is another story. The sun was still hanging low on the horizon when I started the long walk through the forest. The deeper I went, the quieter everything became. Even the birds seemed to avoid that part of the woods. By the time I finally reached the place, the light had already started fading. The building stood in complete decay. It was a mix of concrete and wood, old and broken, as if time itself had tried to erase it. Huge tree roots curled around the walls and pillars, almost as if the forest was slowly trying to pull the structure back into the earth. Mud clung to the bottom of my shoes as I moved closer. There was nothing around me except endless trees, no roads, no houses, no sounds. The isolation of the place made it feel even more disturbing. When I reached the old wooden entrance door, I placed my hand against it and pushed gently. To my surprise, it opened. The inside was swallowed by darkness. A heavy wave of air hit me immediately. It felt thick, stale, almost wet. Then I noticed the smell, a metallic smell, like iron, like old blood. Every step I took made the wooden floor groan beneath my feet. The boards bent slightly, and the sound echoed through the darkness. After only a few steps, I realized the floor was too rotten to trust. One wrong move, and I could easily fall straight through. I decided it was too dangerous to continue inside. Instead, I stepped back out and began walking around the outside of the building. Using my flashlight, I shone the beam through broken windows. Inside, I could make out old beds, rusted equipment, and pieces of torn fabric scattered across the rooms. The cold air wrapped around me. The place was silent, too silent. Then something caught my eye. I moved the flashlight beam across the ground, and suddenly, a metallic reflection flashed back at me. Something was lying near an old stone well. I walked closer. It was a camera, an old model. It was resting in the dirt beside the well, which was built from rough stones and covered by a heavy wooden lid. For a moment, I just stared at it. Who had left it there, and why? I picked it up and slipped it into my backpack. After finishing my exploration of the grounds, I made my way back through the forest and returned to my apartment. On the way, I crossed paths with Mrs. William, one of the women living downstairs. She gave me a strange, forced smile and offered me a slice of cake. I politely refused. Something about the smile unsettled me. I went upstairs, took a long hot shower, and tried to shake off the strange feeling that had followed me back from the forest. Later that night, I sat down at my desk and took the old camera out of my bag. It was in rough shape. The metal body was rusted, covered in brown stains. The screen was cracked. Still, it looked functional enough. I connected it to my computer using an old cable I had with me. At first, I expected to find nothing. Maybe a few broken files, maybe old pictures. But what I found was far worse. The first video file opened. On the screen appeared a young boy. He couldn't have been older than 16. He had pale skin, yellowish hair, a red face from the cold, and bright green eyes full of excitement. I knew that look instantly. The look of an explorer standing on the edge of danger. He was speaking Russian. I do not understand much Russian, but I could make out enough to follow the general meaning. He was talking about the history of the place, about the stories surrounding it, about wanting to find something dangerous and impressive enough to show his friends. His voice carried the same thrill I once had at that age. The recording showed him entering the building. Unlike me, He had actually gone inside. The floor creaked violently beneath him, yet he kept moving forward. Room after room appeared on the screen. Rusty medical equipment, old beds, walls stained with dark marks, clothes scattered across the floor. Everything looked abandoned, but not empty. It felt wrong. Then the camera angle shifted. He stepped back outside and pointed the lens toward the old well. He zoomed in slowly on the wooden lid. I heard him laugh nervously. Then the first video ended. My hand was already tense on the mouse as I clicked the second file. This one began differently. The camera was lying on the ground. At first, I thought it had been dropped by accident. Then I realized something worse. The boy was nowhere in sight. The camera was still aimed directly at the well. But now the wooden lid was gone. The opening was completely exposed. My fingers went cold. Then I heard it. A scream. Hoarse, raw, desperate. It came from inside the well. It was not the kind of scream someone makes for a joke. It was full of pain, pure terror. Then came another sound. A cracking noise. Sharp and dry, like branches snapping. No, like bones breaking. Again and again. The sound echoed through the recording. I felt every muscle in my body tighten. Then suddenly, silence. The video ended. I just sat there in the dim light of my room, staring at the blurry computer screen. For several long seconds, I could not move. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it. I replayed the file twice. The same scream, the same cracking, the same silence. The next morning, I took the recordings to the local police station. I expected concern, at least some kind of reaction. Instead, one of the officers simply patted me on the shoulder and gave a dismissive smile. He said it was probably just some teenager trying to scare people with a prank. A prank. I asked them to at least check missing persons records, to search for the boy's face, to investigate the well, anything, but they refused. Their answer was cold and simple. Finish your stay and go back home. That was all. I left the station with a growing sense that something was deeply wrong. Not just with the place, not just with the recording, but with the entire town. People here did not want questions. They did not want the past opened. And yet, I knew what I had heard. That was not a prank. No teenager screams like that for a joke. No sound effect in the world could copy the sickening crack of real bones. Still, I decided not to push the police any further. At least, not yet. Because deep down, a terrible thought had already begun to grow inside me. If no one else was going to look into what happened to that boy, then I would have to go back myself. And this time, I would not stop at the door. Story 2. Tap, tap, tap. A soft sound pulled me out of sleep. I groaned and turned over, dragging the blanket back up to my damp neck. My room was warm, and I was only half awake, caught in that heavy space between sleep and morning. Tap, tap, tap. Not now, Snowball, I muttered. My cat had the worst timing. Whenever she wanted to go outside, she always chose the middle of the night. If I ignored her for too long, she would usually jump onto the bed and start pawing at my face, until I gave in. Tap, 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 tap. With a tired sigh, I threw the blankets aside and climbed out of bed. I walked past the bathroom and my office, heading toward the living room and the patio door. But when I got there, Snowball was nowhere to be seen. Snowball. The room was empty. I checked near the curtains, under the coffee table, and by the couch. Nothing. A strange feeling settled in my chest. I started walking through the house, calling her name softly. Not in the kitchen, not in the bathroom, definitely not in the bedroom. Finally, I found her curled up in my office chair. She was fast asleep. Her white fur looked almost silver in the dark room, and when I stepped closer, one eye opened halfway. She gave me a slow, annoyed stare, as if I had somehow disturbed her. Then, apparently satisfied that her disappointment had been clearly expressed, she closed her eyes again and drifted back to sleep. I stood there for a moment, confused. Then what had made that sound? Still unsettled, I returned to the patio door and switched on the outside light. The backyard was empty. No movement. No branches scratching the glass. No animal. Nothing. I stared out into the darkness for a few seconds longer before turning the light back off. By then, exhaustion had started pulling at me again. I crawled back into bed and eventually fell asleep. The next morning, I woke to the cold touch of Snowball's nose pressing gently against my cheek. Sunlight spilled across the bedspread in long golden lines. She blinked at me slowly, then stretched and made her way to the end of the bed. She paused, looked back once, and jumped down. A moment later, I heard the familiar clatter of her metal food bowl sliding across the ceramic kitchen floor. Breakfast time. Once we had both eaten, we headed out to the patio. This had become our favorite Sunday morning ritual. Snowball would sit near the edge, tail wrapped neatly around her paws, watching birds in the trees and on the fence. I would sit beside her with my laptop, catching up on emails while enjoying the warmth of the morning sun. It was peaceful, normal. The rest of the day passed easily. I cleaned the bathroom, prepared lunches for the week, and started reading a new sci-fi novel I had been excited about. Snowball had a productive day too. In her own way, she stole a few pieces of roasted chicken from my plate, stared down a neighborhood crow from the fence like she owned the entire street, and later coughed up a hairball in the hallway. A perfectly ordinary day. That evening, while we were curled up on the couch watching an old TV rerun, I thought I heard something. A strange crackling sound. It came from somewhere down the hall. At first it reminded me of an old wooden door slowly creaking open, but mixed with it was something sharper, almost like radio static, a dry electric sound. I turned my head and listened carefully. The sound stopped. The hallway was quiet. I told myself it was probably just the house settling. Old houses made noises, pipes shifted, wood expanded and contracted. Still, something about it stayed with me. That night, I woke again. Tap, tap, tap. The sound was back. This time it was clearer. It sounded exactly like Snowball tapping at the patio door. But then I froze. I could feel her. Her weight was pressing softly against my legs under the blanket. She was on the bed. Tap, tap, tap. Slowly, I raised my head. At the foot of the bed, Snowball was curled into a little white ball, sleeping peacefully. The faint light coming from the hallway reflected off her fur. I stared toward the bedroom door. A cold shiver ran through me. I always turned every light off before going to bed. Always. Yet now, a pale light was spilling across the floor from somewhere outside the room. Tap, tap, tap. The sound continued. Soft, steady, like fingernails against glass. I pulled the pillow over my face and tried to block it out. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe the wind, maybe a branch. Maybe I was more tired than I realized. Eventually, I forced myself back to sleep. By the third night, it was impossible to ignore. I woke suddenly. The tapping had returned, but now it was mixed with that same crackling sound from the hallway. And this time, light was flashing in pulses. A flickering glow spilled under the bedroom door like a slow strobe. Tap, 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 creak, tap, 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 creak, snowball. I sat up quickly and looked around. The bed was empty. She wasn't there. For a moment, my throat tightened. I got out of bed and stepped carefully toward the door. The light was coming from the bathroom. Creak, tap. My heartbeat had grown so loud I could hear it in my ears. As I stepped into the hallway, Snowball suddenly appeared from the kitchen. I nearly jumped. "Hey," I whispered hoarsely. She brushed calmly against my leg and walked straight into the bedroom as if nothing was wrong. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. I was scaring myself. That was all. The overhead light in the bathroom was flickering. I reached up and twisted the bulb. The flickering stopped. The light became steady. Just a loose bulb. That explained it. I switched it off and returned to bed, though sleep didn't come easily after that. The next day after work, I decided I needed something normal, something comforting. So on the way home, I picked up fresh shrimp from the wharf and planned a nice stir-fry for dinner. While I cooked, I tossed a couple of shrimp into a small skillet for Snowball. She sat nearby on a chair, eyes wide, watching every move I made. Her nose twitched with excitement. We ate together on the patio as the sun went down behind the neighboring houses. The sky turned orange, then pink, then slowly faded into blue. Crickets chirped in the yard. The evening felt calm, safe. And yet, somewhere beneath the sounds of the fan above the stove and the music playing softly inside, I thought I could still hear it. That dry crackling sound. Faint, like something moving in the walls. I tried to ignore it. After Snowball finished cleaning the fur around her mouth, she leaped gracefully onto the back fence. A moment later, she disappeared over the other side, probably chasing crickets. She loved the crunch. I went inside and, without even thinking about it, switched on every light in the house. The living room, kitchen, hallway, bathroom, bedroom, every single one. I knew I was being ridiculous. I knew it. But something in my mind had started to twist every shadow into something threatening. I turned on music and began cleaning. Anything to stay busy, anything to keep from thinking. I wiped the counters, dusted the baseboards, rearranged books on the shelves, folded towels. Time passed when I finally heard Snowball scratching softly at the patio door. I jumped so hard, my heart nearly stopped. I rushed over and let her in. She looked perfectly calm. I bent down and stroked the top of her head. Her fur was cool from the night air. I got ready for bed, and this time I left every light on. I knew how irrational it was, but I didn't care. It still took forever to fall asleep. Then my eyes snapped open. I sat upright instantly. The room was dark. Every light was off. Every single one. A wave of panic hit me so suddenly it stole my breath. Creak. The sound was louder now. Closer. I reached frantically across the bed for Snowball. Her usual warm spot was empty. Snowball, then Mew. Her little cry came from somewhere near the bathroom. At least, I thought it did. It sounded strange, distant, as if it were farther away than the walls should allow. I leaped out of bed and started slamming lights on as I ran down the hall. Living room, kitchen, hallway, bathroom. The bathroom door swung open. The room was empty. No Snowball, no movement, no sound. I searched the entire house. The bedroom, the office, the kitchen cabinets, under the couch, behind the curtains, outside on the patio. Nothing. She was gone. And after that night, the sounds never came back. No tapping, no crackling, no creaking, nothing. The house became silent again. Too silent. Days passed, then weeks. Snowball never returned. No sign of her anywhere. No trace. No broken fence board. No open window. No blood. Nothing. Sometimes, late at night, I still wake up suddenly and stare at the hallway. Even now, I still leave the lights on longer than I should, because every once in a while, when the house is completely still, I could swear I hear it again. Tap, 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 soft, patient, coming from somewhere just beyond the bathroom door. Story 3. I need to say this first because I know how unbelievable this sounds. I have no history of mental illness, no anxiety disorder, no hallucinations, no past episodes of anything that would explain what has been happening to me. Other than my grandmother suffering from severe postpartum depression many years ago, there is no history of mental illness in my family. That is why this has been terrifying me so much. My husband and I have lived in this house for the past 5 years. It is a quiet, comfortable home, the kind of place that feels safe. Near the front entrance, just off the foyer, there is a formal living room that we barely ever use. It is mostly for appearance. A clean room with a couch, a side chair, soft curtains, and a small round table in the center. On that table, there are several framed family photos, pictures from holidays, birthdays, old vacations, and one particular photograph of my grandmother. Several weeks ago, I was leaving the house through the front door when something caught my eye. At first, I only noticed it in the corner of my vision. One of the picture frames looked wrong. Not broken, not crooked, just wrong. It looked blurry, fuzzy, as if something was moving beneath the glass. The photograph inside was of my grandmother. I stopped for a moment and stared at it, but I was already running late and didn't want to be even later, so I pushed the thought away and left. I told myself it was probably just the light, a reflection from the window, something harmless. But about a week later, it happened again. This time, someone had knocked on the front door. As I walked past the living room to answer it, I glanced at the same table, the same frame, the same strange blur. Everything else in the room looked completely normal. The other photographs were sharp and clear. The flowers in the vase beside it looked fine. Only my grandmother's picture seemed wrong. This time, I walked over to it. I leaned closer. The image looked almost soft around the edges, like it was slightly out of focus. And then something happened that frightened me more than the picture itself. I reached out to pick it up, but before my fingers touched the frame, something inside me screamed not to. It was not a voice. I didn't hear words. It was more like a sudden force of instinct, a deep, powerful feeling of dread, the kind that hits you in your stomach before your mind understands why. Every part of me froze. My hands stopped in the air. A cold sensation ran through my body. I stepped back immediately. That was the moment I first became truly afraid. Later that evening, when my husband got home from work, I told him everything. I tried to explain how strange the frame looked and how strongly I had felt that I should not touch it. He gave me the kind of smile people give when they think you are just tired. Then he walked straight into the living room. He looked at the frame. "It looks completely normal," he said. Then, to make his point, he picked it up. Nothing happened. No strange feeling. No blurry image. Nothing. He turned it over, checked the back, wiped the glass with his sleeve, and set it down again. Then he gently suggested that maybe I should get my eyes checked. The next day, I made an appointment. I went to the ophthalmologist, expecting them to find something. A vision problem, a change in my prescription, anything. But everything came back normal. My eyesight had not changed at all since my previous exam 5 months earlier. That should have reassured me. Instead, it made things worse. Because if it wasn't my eyes, then what was it? A few days later, I decided I was going to force myself to deal with it. I told myself I was being irrational, that I was letting fear build around something completely harmless. I walked into the living room. The frame was there, waiting. I stepped closer. My hands started shaking almost immediately. I reached out, and then that feeling hit me again, only stronger. It is difficult to describe. It felt like standing at the edge of a cliff in total darkness, like one more step, and I would fall into something endless. Pure dread, pure terror, a feeling so overwhelming that I actually stepped back and started crying. I could not touch it. I simply could not. The next day, I went outside to collect the mail and ran into my neighbor. We are friendly, not extremely close, but close enough to invite each other in for coffee and casual conversation. She took one look at me and asked if I was okay. I must have looked terrible. I invited her inside. We sat for a while and talked, but eventually I told her there was something I wanted to show her. I brought her into the living room. She immediately smiled at the photograph. "Your grandmother was beautiful," she said. I asked her carefully if anything about the frame looked strange. She looked confused. "What do you mean?" I knew from her face that she couldn't see what I was seeing. I didn't even try to explain the fuzziness. I just laughed nervously and said, "Never mind." That was the second person. The second person who saw absolutely nothing unusual. At that point, I didn't know what to do. I was genuinely scared. I tried to ignore it. I really did. But the more I tried not to think about it, the more it seemed to pull me back. It felt almost like the frame was calling to me. I know how insane that sounds. Even writing these words makes me feel like I'm losing my mind. But it's the truth. Every day, I found myself going into that room. Sometimes I would just stand there staring at it. Minutes would pass, then an hour. Sometimes even longer. I would lose track of time completely. I hated being near it. The fear was always there. That deep feeling of dread. And yet, I could not stay away. I started asking more people, 3 more to be exact. Friends, family, people I trusted. Every single one of them said the frame looked normal. 2 of them even picked it up. Nothing happened. I even took a photo of it on my phone and sent it to people. Everyone said the picture looked perfectly fine. No blur, no fuzziness, nothing unusual. That was when I decided maybe something was physically wrong with me. I went to my primary care doctor. I explained that certain things seemed blurry, even though my eye exam had been normal. She ordered blood work and referred me to a neurologist. The neurologist performed a full examination. Everything was normal. Still, he ordered an MRI of my brain and optic nerves. I was terrified while waiting for the results. A tumor, a lesion, some hidden disease. I almost hoped they would find something, because at least then I would have an explanation. But the MRI came back normal, completely normal. He suggested that it might be migraines, even without the presence of headaches. He prescribed medication. It didn't help. The frame still looked wrong. The fear was still there. Eventually, I made an appointment with a psychiatrist. I did it reluctantly. Part of me was terrified that this was all in my head, that I was somehow losing touch with reality. I told her everything, every detail, the image, the dread, the obsession, the fear of touching it. She listened carefully. Then she told me it did not sound like schizophrenia. She suggested it might be anxiety-related, but when I directly asked her whether she thought I should touch the frame, she refused to answer clearly. That disturbed me more than I expected. 2 nights ago, things got worse. I had a dream. In the dream, I woke up in the middle of the night and walked downstairs. The whole house was dark, silent. I moved through the hallway and into the living room. The frame was there, but this time, the photograph was different. My grandmother's face was moving. Her mouth was opening and closing like she was trying to speak to me. I couldn't hear anything. No sound. Just her lips moving. Slowly, desperately, as if she were trying to warn me or call me closer. I reached out toward the frame, and the moment my fingers touched it, I woke up. I was drenched in sweat. My heart was racing. I felt sick to my stomach. Even now, thinking about that dream makes goosebumps rise on my skin. It disturbed me in a way I cannot fully explain. The worst part is that none of this makes sense. I was not taking any medication when this started. I have never used drugs. I drink alcohol occasionally, but never heavily. I had been sleeping normally before all of this began. I am not an anxious person. I do not overthink. I do not panic easily. I am practical, logical, level-headed, and yet this one thing has completely shaken me. I live in an area where people do not talk about ghosts or anything supernatural. No one around me believes in that kind of thing. My friends certainly do not. That makes this feel even lonelier. I feel isolated, scared, ashamed. Part of me keeps thinking, maybe I really am losing my mind. Another part wonders if something was missed on the MRI. What if there is something growing that they didn't catch? What if I am being ridiculous, and all I need to do is pick up the frame? But every time I even think about touching it, that same cold feeling returns, like stepping toward an open grave in the dark. Last night, desperate for answers, I started searching online. One article led to another. One forum post led to the next. Hours disappeared. Eventually, I came across something called the Red Lamp Story. Reading it terrified me. It made everything feel even more real. Now, I don't know what to believe anymore. I am looking for guidance. I am looking for answers. I am looking for anyone who has gone through something like this and come out the other side okay. Because right now I feel like I am standing on the edge of something I cannot understand. And I am terrified of what will happen if I finally touch that frame. Story 4. I looked him straight in the eyes. Right into those dark, hollow eyes. They looked terrible. Absolutely terrible. There was something in them that made my skin crawl. Something cold and empty, yet at the same time filled with horror. Not fear, not guilt, just horror, and somehow not even the smallest trace of regret. It was as if his eyes carried the ghosts of everything he had done, the silent screams of his victims, the damage he had caused, the endless nights he must have spent thinking about violence, replaying every terrible thought over and over again. I could see all of it in his face, or at least that is what it felt like. Still, he did not move. He did not step closer. He did not try to run. He just stood there, watching me, smiling. I had studied every expression he made, every twitch of his mouth, every blink, every shift in his posture. I knew his movements so well that I could almost predict what he would do next. But even then, I never imagined the hatred in his eyes would be this deep, this endless. I know people always say there is a reason behind monsters. A broken childhood, pain, trauma, a darkness that grew slowly over time. I know he had problems, serious ones. There is always a reason for why people become what they become. That much I understand. But somehow, that does not make it easier. If anything, it makes it worse. Because it means he had chances. Chances to walk away. I saw it. I saw the hesitation. Just for a second, a tiny pause. A moment where he could have chosen differently. He had time. He had enough time to stop himself. Enough time to step back. Enough time to choose another path. But he still did it. That is the part I cannot forgive. He always talked about the monsters in his head. The voices, the darkness, the rage. But maybe he forgot something important. He was the monster, not the thoughts, not the world. Him. People say monsters are made, that they are created by pain, by neglect, by suffering. Maybe that is true, but in the end, he still chose it. He chose every step, every lie, every act, every cruel thing he ever did, and it stole my sleep. Night after night, I lay awake thinking about him, trying to understand, trying to find some reason, some explanation, something that would make it all fit together. Why did he really do it? Why didn't he stop? Why didn't he turn back when he still had the chance? Every night I searched for an answer, and every night I found nothing. Nothing at all. No good reason, no justification, only hatred, only a hunger for destruction, only something dark and violent living behind that smile. That smile. God, that smile. The way he stands there so perfectly put together makes me sick. His posture is straight, confident, controlled. His clothes are neat, perfectly chosen. his hair carefully styled, every strand in place. Why does he act like nothing happened? Why does he carry himself like an ordinary man? How can someone who has done something so horrible still wear the face of a normal person? People like him are not human. At least, that is how it feels to me. They are something else, something broken beyond repair, something wearing human skin. And the worst part is that he thinks he belongs among us. He thinks he can simply step back into society as if nothing ever happened, as if all the pain he caused can just disappear, as if he can smile, shake hands, and be welcomed back. And somehow, people like him. They really do. People smile at him, talk to him, trust him. They laugh at his jokes. They stand close to him without ever realizing what he truly is, and I never get the chance to tell them. Who would believe me? Who would listen? He hides it too well. But I can see it. I can see every thought crossing his face, every cold calculation, every false expression, the way he feels no regret, no sorrow, no shame. He simply acts normal. He plays the role perfectly, and everyone around him believes it. People are blind. That is the only explanation. They look into that hideous, carefully composed face and see nothing wrong, nothing twisted, nothing dangerous. But I see it every single time, and it fills me with anger, a deep, burning anger, because now he looks at me like that, like he still thinks he is in control, like he still believes his lies are safe, but they are not anymore. Now he knows, now he sees that I know the truth, that his lies have been uncovered, that sooner or later he will be punished. I keep waiting for him to say something, anything, a threat, a warning, a plea. I wait for him to tell me not to speak. I wait for him to attack me, to do to me what he has done before. Something violent, something cruel, something final. But he just stands there, still smiling. That awful smile, perfect white teeth, a charming grin, the kind of smile that could fool anyone. The last thing someone might see before everything goes dark. It sends a chill through my entire body. I cannot stop staring. I cannot look away. The longer I look, the more the hatred inside me grows. Then I hear a voice behind me, soft, confused. Why are you staring at the mirror again for so long? My wife. Her voice cuts through the silence. For a moment, I freeze. Slowly, I turn my head and look at her. Then I turn back, and once again, I am face to face with him. Only now I finally understand. There is no one else standing there. No stranger. No killer waiting in the dark. No monster smiling back at me. Only my own reflection. My own eyes. Dark, hollow, filled with sleepless nights and something I no longer know how to name. My own face, perfectly dressed, hair carefully in place, a smile slowly stretching across lips I no longer recognize, and in that terrible moment, I realize the truth that has been hunting me all this time. I was never looking at someone else. I was looking at myself. Story 5. I'm sorry, this isn't going to read like a proper report. There won't be citations or cautious language or carefully worded hypotheses. What we found does not deserve the politeness of academic restraint. I understand what this means for me. If anyone survives to review this, I will likely be charged, disgraced, imprisoned. That is fine. What we discovered cannot be allowed to continue. It began as a model project, a contained marine study. We were observing unusual clustering behavior in deep-water octopus colonies near a trench off the Japanese coast. At first, it was promising, beautiful even. We measured seismic activity around the colony, food availability, social interactions. We documented tool use, coordinated hunting patterns, shared den spaces. It really did look like an octopus utopia. We established 2 main labs, one on site in Japan, the other at our partner facility across the globe. Our working theory was that environmental pressures had triggered some form of proto-civilization. It sounded absurd when we first said it out loud. It became less absurd by the week. The first anomaly was infrastructure. Small pieces of our equipment, loose bolts, fragments of drone casing, discarded markers, began appearing integrated into their structures, not random debris, placed deliberately, aligned symmetrically. Coral dens became arranged in clusters with clear central pathways. We thought it was curiosity. Then the anthropologist noticed the symbols, carved into coral, pressed into sand, etched into shell fragments. 2-dimensional shapes. We believed at first they resembled boats, kayak-like outlines with 8 radiating lines around them. They drew them fluidly with multiple arms working at once, fast and purposeful, the same shape repeated over and over. It appeared above den entrances. It was traced into sand before social gatherings. When 2 approached one another, one would briefly sketch the shape. It became our shorthand, "Peace be with you." It was absurd. It was thrilling. No known non-human species has evolved symbolic religious imagery until now. Then came the clearing, a wide, flat expanse of sand at the center of the colony. No dens, no food caches, no tools. Every day, multiple individuals gathered there. Their behavior was impossible to categorize. They pulsed with color, rapid transitions between deep crimson and stark white. Limbs thrashed violently, then stilled, then moved in slow synchronized patterns. Halfway between dance and mourning, every few minutes they would collapse flat against the sand, then begin again. We joked and called it the Harlem Shake. We should not have joked. We planned our first dive into the colony. Myself, the botanist, and the marine biologist. Our goal was simple: collect kelp samples, coral fragments, and sand from the clearing. They did not retreat when we entered the water. They watched. Some reached out and wrapped our fingers gently, exploratory, curious, like children. We collected coral first, then kelp. We left the sand for last. The order did not matter. We were wrong. As the marine biologist scooped a sample from the clearing, the sand shifted, at first subtly, then violently. The ground itself liquefied beneath us. A massive plume of ink erupted upward, so dense it erased visibility entirely. Something moved inside it, not darting, unfolding. The force that struck us felt less like an animal attack and more like tectonic displacement. I saw limbs, thick as tree trunks, coil through the cloud. There was a snap, a beak, not the size of any known octopus species. Red mist bloomed in the water. I do not know which of them it was. The ink thrashed and surged. I felt myself thrown backward. Training overrode thought. I kicked upward blindly and broke the surface. The anthropologist was already there, or part of her was. She was suspended at the surface, wrapped in multiple tentacles, her throat crushed, her limbs bent wrong. Below her, the ink thinned, and I saw it. Not a boat, not a symbol of us. A beak, massive, encircled by 8 vast appendages. The iconography we had admired was not reverence toward us. It was representation, their god, buried beneath the clearing. The dance was not celebration. It was supplication. The clearing was not empty. It was a mouth. It had allowed us to build our labs above it, allowed us to integrate our debris into their structures. It had watched, learned, waited. I surfaced alone. The anthropologist did not scream for long. The colony did not scatter. They gathered, color rippling in synchronized waves. Their god had fed. We reanalyzed the symbols. The shape was never our boat's. It was the beak. The 8 radiating lines were not sun rays. They were tentacles. The greeting was not peace be with you. It was acknowledgement of the devourer. Our presence was not coincidence. It had drawn us. Seismic anomalies we dismissed as tectonic were rhythmic. Pulse patterns. We had measured its breathing. It is not an animal in any framework we recognize. It is too large to be biological in the conventional sense. Too old. The trench beneath the colony extends deeper than mapped surveys account for. It resides there, embedded, anchored, waiting. The octopi are not evolving civilization. They are organizing worship. We were not studying a society. We were trespassing in a cathedral. I have rigged the charges along the structural supports of the research vessel and the underwater array. It will collapse the trench mouth. It may not kill it. Bury it again. Delay it. If we leave this place intact, it will continue. It has already adapted to our presence, incorporated our materials, our patterns, our machines. It is learning language. It is learning us. The upload is almost complete. I will descend with the detonation device. There is no evacuation plan, no appeal for funding, no committee review. If this message reaches anyone, do not attempt recovery. Do not send divers. Do not rebuild the array. Let the trench remain uncharted. Let the clearing remain undisturbed. And if you ever see the symbol, the beak, crowned by 8 limbs, understand what it truly means. It is not greeting you. It is marking you. The upload is complete. Goodbye. Story 6. I'm still here. The Wi-Fi flickered 3 times while I was typing. It keeps cutting in and out, like the house is breathing around the signal. If this posts, I need it to be clear. My name is Elliot Marsh. I am in a village called Rapilly, somewhere west of Paris. The man downstairs is named Mark. He is not just a man. I can hear him on the other side of the study door. He's not knocking. He's not trying the handle. He's just there. The shadow under the door is too wide. It fills the entire gap, like something pressed flat against the wood. He's whispering again, in my voice. The first night we talked about David, I've never told anyone that before. Over and over. Perfect cadence, the exact softness in my throat. even the tiny hitch before I said before. He recorded everything, not with devices, with himself. I don't think he understands that repetition isn't the same as meaning. He thinks if he loops it enough times, I'll hear the comfort in it instead of the theft. He just shifted his weight. I can hear the boards under his feet, but they don't creak the way they do under mine. It's like the house absorbs him differently. The Wi-Fi is back. I need to keep moving, keep typing. If I stop, I'll start thinking about how his voice cracked earlier in the kitchen, how real it sounded. That's the worst part. He sounds real now, not polished, not curated, not the perfect man who remembered the date I first mentioned, lavender soap. He sounds tired, starved. The village is worse tonight. I looked out the study window 10 minutes ago. The fountain in the square isn't running anymore. The water's just sitting there, thick and unmoving, like gelatin. Henri's truck lights flickered once and went dark. The old man on the bench is gone, not moved, gone. The space where he sat is empty in a way that feels unfinished, like a photo where someone was cut out. When I starve Mark, I'm not just starving him. I'm erasing the village. I don't know what that makes me. The stairs creaked again, a single step. He's moving closer to the door. The handle just twitched, not fully turned, just tested. I put the desk chair under the knob earlier. I know it won't stop him if he wants to come in. The house doesn't resist him. It resists me. The Wi-Fi cut. It's back. He stopped, whispering. Now there's silence. Not the empty kind, the listening kind. The kind I felt in Brooklyn sometimes, when I'd wake up at 3 a.m. and feel like the room was waiting for me to do something. I remember that night in Brooklyn so clearly. Cereal bowl in my lap, milk getting warm, waiting for his FaceTime call. The anticipation felt like heat in my chest. I tried to feel it just now. I can't. I can see the kitchen, the bowl, the phone lighting up, but the feeling is gone. He already took it. He didn't take the memory. He took the charge. That's how he feeds. Not on events, on the electricity around them. He's speaking again. Softer. Not my voice this time. His. Elliot. He says, "You're hurting the others." The way he says others makes it sound like family. "You don't have to tell me everything," he continues. "Just something small. What did the sky look like this morning?" My throat tightened when he said that, because I know the answer. It was pale blue, almost white at the horizon, with a single cloud shaped like a torn envelope. And I almost say it. I almost open the door and sit at that table and tell him about the cloud and the bird and the way the air smelled like damp stone. And if I do, I won't get up again, because he'll look at me the way he always did, like I'm the only thing in the world, like my words are oxygen, and my body doesn't care that the thing breathing them in is older than the house. The Wi-Fi just flickered again. If this cuts, I need to say this. The basement is not just storage. It's digestion. Those bags aren't trophies. They're remains of structure. He consumes your narrative first, then your context, then your weight in the world. By the time you go down there isn't much left to bury. The handle just turned fully. The chair scraped against the floor The door pushed inward an inch. He didn't force it. He didn't need to. The house loosened around him. The shadow widened. He's standing in the doorway now. He looks like Mark, hair slightly messy, eyes soft. But there's something wrong with the space around him. The air behind him is darker than the hallway should be, like depth where there should be wall. "Elliot," he says. He sounds like he did in Brooklyn, like he did in Charles de Gaulle, like the first time he said, "Tesla, come downstairs." He's not smiling. He's not performing. He looks smaller. And that's what scares me. Because if he's small, then what I've been feeding is large. Behind him, through the hallway window, I can see the square. The church tower is cracked down the middle. The flower boxes have collapsed. The fountain is dry. The village is thinning. He takes a step into the study. The chair tips over uselessly. "I don't want to disappear," he says, and for a second, I believe him. For a second, I see him, not as a predator, but as something trapped inside its own structure. Something that learned to feed the only way it could. "You don't have to leave," he says. "We can build something new." That's the hook, not eternal love, reconstruction. Salvation. My hand is shaking. I'm still typing. He's 2 steps away now. I can see the place where his eyes are just a little too still. The part of him that isn't Mark is watching me through him, waiting to see what I'll give. I won't. I can't. If I speak, I feed him. If I love him, I anchor him. If I stay, I become another tag in the basement. He reaches out. His hand hovers near my face. Cool, stone cool. "Tell me something," he whispers. And I realize something awful. He doesn't just feed on what I say. He feeds on the wanting to say it. The tension in my chest right now. The ache. The almost. That's enough. The room flickers. The bookshelf behind him distorts, like a bad rendering in a video game. The Wi-Fi signal drops to nothing. My screen freezes for half a second. When it comes back, he's closer. His face shifts. Just a frame. Kareem. Then Thomas. Then someone I don't recognize. Then Mark again. The village outside the window is unraveling. Stone dissolving into fog. The church tower folding inward like paper. He is not just a man. He is the structure that held this place together. And I've been starving the foundation. He kneels in front of me. Not threatening, not looming. Just kneeling. "Please," he says. And it's the most human word he's spoken since I arrived. My chest hurts. My body wants to lean forward, to touch his face, to end the silence. If this posts, if anyone reads it, understand this. Loneliness is a lever. Attention is a key. And something in the world is very good at turning both. He just said my name again. Softer. I'm closing the laptop. I'm not answering if I don't post again. I did not look back. Check the southern road. If it loops, keep walking. Don't stop when the trees thin. Don't answer when it asks about your day. Don't tell it about the sky. And whatever you do, don't let your food love you. Story 7. I never thought I'd end up spying on my own life like some jealous stranger. At first, it was just the house. Old houses settle, people say. Wood shifts. Pipes groan. Air finds its way through seams you can't see. That's what I told myself the first time I heard the cabinet close downstairs at 3 in the morning. Then the floorboards creaked in the hallway while my wife and I were both in bed. Then I heard humming, her lullaby, the one she used to sing when our daughter was a baby. The same wrong note on the third bar, the same breathy laugh when she'd realize she was off key. It came from the kitchen. At 2:17 a.m., I lay there frozen, listening, waiting for it to stop. It did. And I didn't sleep again that night. I told myself I was stressed. Work had been grinding me down for years. Long hours, little pay, the kind of fatigue that sinks into your bones and makes you short-tempered without meaning to be. But the feeling wouldn't leave. That sense of being observed, not by something outside the house, by something inside it. So I installed cameras. Every room, hallway, garage, front and back doors, night vision, motion alerts, cloud backup. The technician joked that I'd finally sleep easy. I didn't. The first time I saw him, I thought it was a glitch. I was at work. Badge logs confirmed I hadn't left. My computer activity showed I'd been at my desk all morning. But on my phone, in the live feed, I watched myself walk from the kitchen into the living room. Same hoodie, same posture, except different. He moved like he wasn't carrying anything heavy, like he hadn't been worn thin by years of compromise. He sat on the couch and turned on the morning news the way my wife likes it. Volume low, captions on. Then he looked up at the camera and smiled, not at the lens, at me. I watched that clip until my eyes burned. It was my face, every detail perfect, except the eyes. They were steady, soft, unburdened. I didn't tell my wife, not then. A few nights later, I got a motion alert while I was in the shower. I stepped out dripping, heart pounding, and opened the app. The bedroom camera showed him sitting on the edge of the bed, talking to her. She was laughing, really laughing, the kind I hadn't heard in a long time. He brushed her hair back from her face. She leaned into his hand. "God," she whispered, "I missed this version of you." That sentence hit harder than anything else. Not "who are you?" Not "what's wrong with you?" This version. I didn't scream at him that night. I waited. I tested it. I left the house and checked the feeds from random parking lots. He was always there, cooking dinner before she asked, folding laundry without being reminded, fixing the faucet I'd been promising to repair for weeks. She started telling me, "You've been so present lately." She kissed me in the mornings and meant it. At night, she curled toward the side of the bed where he had been sitting hours earlier. I began deleting the footage, overwriting everything older than 12 hours. It didn't matter. He kept appearing, sometimes in 2 rooms at once, sometimes behind me while I was watching him on my phone. Last week, I came home early. I didn't text her. I didn't call. I unlocked the front door quietly and stepped inside. The house felt occupied. Not noisy, occupied. I checked every room. Empty. Then I opened the live feed. On my phone, I was sitting on the couch reading the book she'd begged me to read for months. Calm, focused, content. I looked down at my own hands. They were shaking, work shoes still on, keys digging into my palm. When I looked back at the phone, he lifted his head slowly and stared straight into the camera. No smile, just disappointment. He stood, walked to the front door, opened it. Behind me, the real front door clicked open. I couldn't turn around. I didn't have to. Soft footsteps crossed the hard wood, stopped just behind my left shoulder. I smelled my old cologne, the one I stopped buying because it felt unnecessary. A hand, my hand, rested gently on my shoulder. "It's okay," he said, my voice, but smoother. "You've been so tired. Let me take it from here." Something inside me loosened. From the kitchen, my wife called out, cheerful and warm, "You're home early. Dinner's almost ready." The hand squeezed my shoulder once. I opened my mouth to shout, to warn her. What came out instead was easy. "Familiar? Smells great, love. I'll set the table." The hallway camera caught it in sharp detail. Two identical men standing in the foyer, one trembling, one perfectly still. Then the trembling one didn't move. He faded, not physically, but in priority, like a background process shutting down. The calm one adjusted his hoodie, nodded once at the camera, and walked into the kitchen. I don't know which one I am anymore. Sometimes I think I'm still in the foyer, watching through glass. Other times I think I'm in the kitchen, laughing at her jokes, being the man she always wanted me to be. But every night, after the lights go out, I hear it. A drawer opening downstairs, footsteps in the hallway, and my own voice humming that lullaby, hitting the wrong note on the third bar, waiting for the last of me to fall asleep. If you have cameras in your house, check them, look closely, not just at the timestamps, at the eyes. And if you ever see yourself being kinder, calmer, more patient than you remember being, don't confront it. Don't try to fight it, because one of you is already winning, and it's never the one still afraid. Sleep well. We'll be seeing you soon. Story 8. I didn't go to the police right away. That's always the first question people ask. Like there's a checklist for this sort of thing. Like there's a clean sequence of actions that makes everything understandable. But this didn't feel like a crime. It felt like something that had already begun long before anyone noticed my brother was gone. Daichi wasn't reckless. He didn't gamble, didn't owe money, didn't pick fights. He worked the overnight shift at a radio station that mostly catered to insomniacs and long-haul truckers. He liked the night. Said people were more honest when they were tired. 3 weeks ago in our kitchen, he asked me something strange. "Have you ever heard someone say your name when no one's there?" I laughed. "Like ghosts." "Not like that," he said. "It sounds exactly like someone you know. Same voice, same tone." I told him he was tired. He nodded. "Yeah, probably." That was the last normal conversation we had. He left for work. He didn't come home. The station manager told me he had shown up for his shift. Gone on air. Finished his first segment. "And then?" I asked. "And then he wasn't here anymore. No one saw him leave. No struggle, nothing out of place. Except the recording. His last broadcast started normal. Music, static, his usual introduction. Then he read a story about someone receiving anonymous phone calls at the same time every night. No one speaking. just breathing. On the seventh night, the caller finally spoke. "You've been listening so long. Why won't you answer?" His voice changed slightly when he read that line. Not dramatic, just closer. Then he said he had one more story. It wasn't scheduled. He said it came as a file. No sender, no timestamp. And he began reading about a radio host who read stories sent to him late at night, until the stories stopped being stories, he said, and became instructions. The audio warped. Breathing filled the background. "Hello," a voice whispered. Not his. "Are you still listening?" The manager shut it off there. Later, in Daichi's apartment, I found the USB tape under his unplugged bedside radio. He'd left recordings. "I don't know where they're coming from," he said in the first one. "They don't have senders. They keep appearing." In the third file, he sounded afraid. "If anyone finds this, don't listen to the recordings. Don't read them. And if you hear it," the file cut. That should have been the end. But at 2:17 a.m., my computer powered on by itself. A new file appeared. No name, no date. I knew what it was. I clicked it. Finally, a voice said, "It wasn't Daichi. You're listening." It spoke calmly, familiar, almost patient. "He followed the stories," it said. "You want to find him, don't you?" I just kept listening. Because if this thing knew where he was, then stopping would mean losing him completely. Since that night, the files keep appearing. Sometimes audio, sometimes text documents, sometimes transcripts of things I don't remember saying. At first, they were small, stories about people hearing their names whispered from empty rooms, stories about radios turning on by themselves, stories about someone discovering a USB under a bed. Then they changed. They began including details only I would know. Descriptions of our kitchen, the chipped tile by the sink, the way Daichi tilted his head when he was thinking. The files started using you. You remember how he asked you about hearing your name? You laughed. You dismissed him. You're listening now. The last file wasn't a story. It was a list. Recreate his routine. Sit in his chair. Speak into the mic. Invite them to listen. I don't have a mic, but I've started talking out loud at night. Testing the air. "Hello," I said yesterday at 2:17 a.m. The room felt thicker afterward. My phone vibrated. A new file appeared instantly. "Good," it said. "That's how it begins. I don't know if Daichi is dead." The voice never says he is. It only says he crossed over. It says he followed the final story, that he answered, and that answering isn't death. It's participation. The newest file arrived an hour ago. It's just text, no audio. It says, "You think this is about finding him. It isn't. It's about replacing him." My computer screen flickered after I read that. For a split second, the reflection on the dark monitor wasn't me. It was Daichi, or something shaped like him, smiling faintly, not trapped, not afraid, just present. I've started noticing things. My voice sounds slightly different when I play it back on my phone. Lower, smoother. There's a pause in my speech sometimes, like something else is buffering. Yesterday, I said my own name out loud in the kitchen, and I heard it answered, in Daichi's voice, from the hallway. "Yeah?" It felt natural, like he'd always been there. The stories are still coming, and they're not just about people who listen anymore. They're about people who become. The latest one ends with a line I can't stop thinking about. If you stop writing, you disappear. So I'm writing, because if I stop, I'm not sure I'll know where I end, and whatever he followed begins. If this post goes through, and if you're reading it, ask yourself something simple. When was the last time you heard your name in an empty room? And when you did you answer? Story 9. When we are young, our parents tell us that monsters do not exist. They reassure us that there is nothing hiding in the darkness, no creatures lurking under our beds or inside our closets. These comforting words help me get through many sleepless nights, just like they helped countless other children. But even with these reassurances, I always felt something unsettling in my bedroom after the lights went out. There was a heaviness in the air that I could never quite shake off. I remember waking up one night from a dream. My eyes opened slowly, adjusting to the darkness around me. That is when I saw him. A man with no face stood right next to my bed, staring down at me. At least, I think he was staring. Without a face, it was hard to tell. My heart pounded in my chest as I squeezed my eyes shut, counting to 10 before opening them again. He was still there, motionless and silent. I repeated this several times, closing my eyes and opening them, hoping he would vanish. Each time I opened my eyes, he remained in the same position. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he disappeared. I never understood what I had seen that night, and eventually, I pushed the memory away and forgot about it entirely. We all grew up hearing stories about the boogeyman hiding in closets or monsters living under our beds. As adults, we laugh at these childhood fears, but back then, they felt very real. I remember a boy in my second grade class named Darren, who told us about a woman who would tap on his bedroom door at night. Darren had brown hair cut very short in a buzz cut style. He had bright blue eyes and pale white skin. You could tell a lot about him from the simple clothes he wore, usually just a plain black shirt and cargo shorts. Darren would tell anyone who would listen about this woman. He said she was his best friend, that she was always there for him when he needed someone to talk to. Naturally, none of us believed him. We thought he was making it up for attention, or maybe just had an overactive imagination. But something about his story fascinated me. I could not stop thinking about it. At first, I thought maybe it was just his mother checking on him at night, but that did not make sense. What mother would wake her child up in the middle of the night, especially on school nights? The whole thing seemed strange and unexplainable. One day during lunch, I decided I needed to know more. I sat at the table with Darren and his friends, positioning myself diagonally across from him. They were talking about some television show they all watched, laughing and joking with each other. I waited for a pause in their conversation, gathering up my courage. I felt nervous because I did not want them to think I was weird or crazy for asking about it, but my curiosity was too strong to ignore. I finally spoke up, trying to sound casual. I told him that I had heard about the tapping from one of my friends, and asked him what happened after the tapping stopped. Darren hesitated for a moment, looking down at his lunch tray. Then he looked back up at me and spoke softly, almost in a whisper. He said that she would come into his room and talk to him. She would ask him about his troubles and listen to whatever he wanted to say. He insisted that she was nice and that I would like her if I ever met her. I asked him why she only showed up when everyone else was sleeping. He shrugged his shoulders and said he did not know. One of the other kids at the table made a joke, suggesting that maybe she was like a vampire. Everyone burst out laughing at that. I forced myself to chuckle along with them because I did not want to feel left out, but inside, I was still trying to make sense of what Darren had told me. Later that day during recess, I found my best friend Kayla and told her everything Darren had said. She was just as confused and intrigued as I was. We stood by the swings, talking in hushed voices so the other kids could not hear us. I told her how the other boys had laughed at the vampire joke. Kayla smiled and said that at least they were not teasing us about having cooties like they usually did. We both laughed at that. Then, Kayla had an idea. She suggested that we invite Darren to her birthday party. Every year, Kayla threw a slumber party in the community clubhouse at our apartment complex. It was like a lock-in party where we would stay up all night. She would invite all her friends, mostly girls from our class. Her dad would get permission from the property owners to use the space, and we would spend the entire night watching movies, playing games, telling jokes, and eventually falling asleep in our sleeping bags scattered across the floor. I was usually the first one to wake up the next morning. While I waited for everyone else to stir, I would sit by the window and watch the world wake up outside. I loved watching the cars drive on and off the Sagamore Bridge as the sun came up. The building I lived in sat on a hill, giving me a perfect view of the bridge and the sky beyond it. The view from the clubhouse was not quite as good, but that did not matter to me. I just wanted to see the lights of the cars moving back and forth across the bridge, watching the sky change colors from dusky red to bright blue as morning arrived. Kayla had never invited a boy to her birthday party before, but we were desperate to solve this mystery. We needed to know if this woman Darren talked about was real or just something he had made up. I asked Kayla if her parents would even allow a boy at the party. She thought about it for a moment and said they probably would. Her birthday was coming up soon, and if it did not fall on a weekend, her parents would schedule the party for the Saturday after. If her birthday was on a Friday, they would have the party the very next day. I had already wished Kayla a happy birthday that morning at school. During art class, Kayla finished making her clay pot early, so she spent the extra time making a special invitation for Darren. It was not as professional looking as the printed invitations her parents had made for the rest of the class, but it would work. The regular invitations had a silly cartoon character on them that her dad had designed. He was a graphic designer and always added special touches to make things more fun. This year's character was a dog wearing glasses, a button-up shirt, blue jeans, and a red tie. The dog had small, beady black eyes and a round snout with a tiny rectangular nose on top. Last year, her dad had drawn a cartoon girl with big oval eyes, wearing a pink skirt and blue shirt. She had a pink cap on her head and wore small high heels. I thought she was so pretty when I first saw that invitation. I even dressed like her for the sleepover that year, which surprised Kayla's parents. I still have that invitation taped to my bedroom mirror at home. I named the cartoon girl Kina. After art class, we had social studies. Our teacher handed back our United States geography tests. I got a B, Kayla got an A-, and it seemed like everyone else in class had passed as well. Before the lesson started, our teacher allowed Kayla to hand out her party invitations to some of our classmates. We knew they would be surprised when Darren received his invitation, especially since it looked different from all the others. Kayla did not have the skills to recreate the cartoon dog her father had drawn, so she just drew a simple smiley face on Darren's invitation. Despite it being handmade and simple, Darren seemed honored to receive it. I think part of him knew that we had invited him, because we wanted to meet the tapping lady he kept talking about. That night, I had trouble falling asleep. My mind raced with questions and possibilities. If what Darren said was actually true, how would this mystery woman get into the clubhouse during the party? Would she come through a window? Through the front entrance? Maybe through the basement, though that seemed unlikely since my parents and Kayla's parents would be sleeping down there to supervise. My bed felt unusually cold that night. I had left my window open, but it was April, so it should not have been that cold. Actually, the coolness felt rather nice against my skin. I lay there staring up at my ceiling for what felt like hours. During the day, my ceiling was plain white, but at night, it transformed into a dark, soothing shade of blue. I turned my head to look at my alarm clock on the nightstand. The glowing red numbers read 4:13 in the morning. I had gone to bed at 7:30, thinking I would get plenty of sleep. I figured I had rested enough, so I got out of bed and walked to my window. Looking past the trees outside, I could see the bridge in the distance. The lights along the bridge were on, illuminating the structure against the dark sky. The arches of the bridge faded into the fog that had rolled in. Cars passed back and forth across it, white headlights coming in, red taillights going out. The trees that were green during the day now looked black in the darkness. The sky above was a deep shade of purple, and I could see stars faintly twinkling through the night. I listened to the sounds outside. Birds were already chirping, even though dawn had not arrived yet. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. Then I heard geese honking as they flew over my apartment building in formation, their calls echoing in the quiet morning air. Behind me, I heard my bedroom door open. I spun around quickly and saw my dad standing in the doorway. He spoke in a hushed voice, careful not to wake my mother. He called me princess and asked what I was doing up so early. I turned back to look at the bridge. He walked over and crouched down behind me, following my gaze to the cars moving in and out of the Cape. He sighed and said he knew the view was pretty, but it was time for me to get back to bed. He guided me back under my covers and tucked me in before returning to his own room. The next morning, I sat at the kitchen table eating my bowl of Fruity Pebbles cereal. I was incredibly excited for the party and whatever adventures awaited us. I had the hiccups all morning, but they went away when Kayla arrived. Her parents brought her over to my apartment before each birthday event. We knew I was being used as a distraction while they set up the clubhouse, but neither of us cared. We enjoyed spending time together. We sat in my living room watching whatever shows were on television that morning. My mom stayed nearby to make sure we behaved ourselves, though I think she secretly enjoyed the shows as much as we did. As the characters on the screen danced and acted out the story of the week, Kayla turned to me with a concerned look on her face. She asked what would happen if Darren was just playing a prank on all of us. I asked her why he would do something like that. She said she was not sure, but there was no way his story could actually be true. I reminded her that she had already given him the invitation and could not take it back now. She agreed and went back to watching television. We spent the next few hours keeping busy. After watching TV, we went to the playground across the street and played for an hour. Then my mom drove us to an ice cream shop near the beach, where we hung out and enjoyed our treats. The sun was not too hot that day, not like it would be once summer arrived and school let out. I remember having vanilla ice cream. Kayla had cookie dough. Actually, I think I had mint chocolate chip. We walked along the shore for a while, watching the waves splash onto the sand beside us, while seagulls squealed overhead. We returned to the apartment complex and saw other kids already walking into the clubhouse. We did not see Darren yet, but we did spot Sammy, the tomboy from our class. She was really into basketball and played on the school team. She also had a sassy attitude that we would never dare copy unless we wanted to get in trouble with our mothers. My mom parked the car in our assigned spot, and Kayla and I walked over to the clubhouse together. As soon as we stepped inside, we heard Sammy's voice from across the room greeting Kayla. Kayla greeted her back, and I waved and smiled a little. While other kids from school were being dropped off by their parents, our parents helped set everything up. They arranged snacks on tables and hung a piñata from the ceiling with a thin white rope. Kayla and I watched the doors, waiting for Darren to arrive. Just when we thought he might not show up, we heard the door open. The entire room turned to look as Darren walked in carrying his sleeping bag and a backpack that I assumed held his clothes for the next day. He walked over to the couch and sat down, placing his things beside him. The party went exactly as it did every year. The adults brought out an ice cream cake with candles shaped like Kayla's age. Sammy had to be held back by the other girls to keep her from ruining the surprise. We all took turns trying to hit the piñata while blindfolded. And just like last year, Sammy was the one who finally broke it open and sent candy scattering across the floor. As night fell, the adults went downstairs to the basement to give us privacy and let us sleep. What they did not know was that we had no intention of sleeping. Not yet, anyway. We brought Darren to the center of the room and sat in a circle around him. We asked him to explain everything about this mystery woman he had told us about. He went through all the details we already knew, repeating his story. Then Shelley, the class bookworm, spoke up from somewhere in the circle. She asked what the woman's name was. Darren paused for a long moment. We were not sure if he had ever learned her name, or if he was making something up on the spot. Finally, he opened his mouth and spoke. He said she went by Miss Penny. Sammy scoffed and said that was a stupid name. Darren shot back defensively, insisting that it was not stupid. Then Susie, another girl from our class, asked if Miss Penny was married to Mr. Dollar. Everyone started giggling quietly, trying not to wake the adults downstairs. Darren's face turned bright red with embarrassment. Even Kayla and I were laughing along with everyone else. Then we heard it. Tap, tap, tap. The sound was loud enough to make us all stop laughing immediately. It sounded like someone tapping with their fingernails against a hard surface. The sound came from somewhere else in the room, but we could not pinpoint exactly where. Was it the bathroom door? The front door? No. The front door was chained and locked to prevent anyone from breaking in. The blinds covering the windows were closed, and all the windows were locked tight. We heard it again. Tap, tap, tap. It was definitely coming from the bathroom. We all turned to look at Darren. All 7 of us watched in silence as he slowly stood up and walked across the room toward the bathroom door. He placed his hand on the doorknob and hesitated. He did not know if he should open it or not. He glanced back at us over his shoulder, then faced the door again and turned the knob. The door opened, to reveal nothing but pitch blackness inside. We had a small nightlight plugged in for those of us who were afraid of the dark, but its weak glow barely reached halfway down the hall. We all stared into the darkness, waiting to see something. Maybe an evil old woman would appear. Then we saw it. First, a red high-heel shoe stepped into the light. Then a second red high heel appeared. Both shoes were attached to two pale fit legs that extended upward into a red business suit dress. Under the dress, she wore a blue button-up shirt. It was faint in the dim light, but we could see it emerging from her neckline. She had a slim figure but also had prominent curves. Our eyes traveled up from her waist to her chest, then to her neck, and finally to her face. Her face was impossibly smooth, almost like a porcelain doll. She wore bright red lipstick and black mascara that made her eyes stand out dramatically. Not that her eyes needed any help standing out. They were unusually large, almost perfectly round, instead of the normal oval shape. Her eyebrows were thin and brown. Her hair was also brown and cut in a bob style that framed her face. She looked like something from a fashion magazine or a poster that teenage boys would hang on their bedroom walls. She was stunning, absolutely beautiful. She smiled, revealing perfectly white teeth, and spoke in a whisper. Her voice was so clear in the silent room that we could all hear her, despite how softly she spoke. She greeted Darren warmly. He waved back at her quietly. Then her gaze shifted to the rest of us, sitting on the other side of the room. Her smile remained fixed on her face as she studied us. She asked Darren who his friends were. He explained that they had wanted to see her because they did not believe she was real. She paused, continuing to look at us. Her smile faded for just a moment before returning to her face. She nodded slowly, then asked Darren if he was going to introduce her to everyone. Darren walked over and took her hand, leading her across the room to where we sat. The clubhouse echoed with the sharp clacking of her high heels against the floor. We each introduced ourselves, one by one. She sat down on the couch and listened to each of us, smiling the entire time. When we had all finished introducing ourselves, she introduced herself in return. She told us her name was Miss Penny, speaking with a slight British accent. She said she was sure that Darren had told us a lot about her already. We all nodded at the same time, almost like we were under some kind of spell. Sammy, being bold as always, asked her why she only came at night. Miss Penny's eyebrows furrowed together. She squinted slightly and stared off into empty space for a moment. Then her eyes widened again, and she looked back at Sammy. She said she was not sure if she could answer that question properly. After a brief pause, she added that we could say she came from over the rainbow. Sammy let out a small, sarcastic chuckle. She was not amused at all. As far as Sammy was concerned, a complete stranger had just crawled through the bathroom window to mess with us. Miss Penny stood up from the couch. She announced that as much as she would love to stay with all of us, she believed it was time for her to leave. As she spoke, she stared up at the ceiling, focusing on something slightly above where we sat. We all looked up to see what she was looking at. The ceiling fan spun slowly above us. I stood up and walked over to her, tapping her shoulder to get her attention. She snapped out of whatever trance she was in and jerked her neck down to look at me. I asked if she could stay just a few more minutes. She knelt down to my level, placing her hands on my shoulders. She called me sweetheart and smiled softly at me. She said she would not be gone for long. Then she glanced over at the rest of the group. She added that besides, Darren had all of us girls to keep him company now. As she spoke to me, her breath drifted into my nose. Despite her pearly white teeth, her breath smelled absolutely rotten. It was not like the bad breath of a dog who had eaten something gross. This was different. It smelled like something had died. I imagined a mouse crawling into her mouth while she slept and being unable to escape. She suggested that we all head to bed now and said she would tuck us in. We all went to our sleeping bags and climbed inside, zipping them up around us. Miss Penny came by to each of us, double-checking that our zippers were fully closed. She leaned down and gave each of us a kiss on the cheek. I watched as she walked over to Darren last and did the same for him, but she spent much longer with him than she had with the rest of us. Were they talking? If so, what were they saying to each other? I did not think much of it at the time. I closed my eyes and prepared myself to fall asleep. Miss Penny began to hum a lullaby. I cannot remember which song it was, but the melody was incredibly soothing. I felt myself beginning to doze off. Her tune was almost hypnotizing, pulling me deeper into sleep. I started drowning out everything around me, all the small sounds and movements, until finally I drifted off into a peaceful sleep like a baby. I woke up to the sound of screaming coming from the clubhouse kitchen. I looked over and saw that our parents were trying to keep the other kids from going into the kitchen, but they could not hold everyone back. The kids stopped asking questions as soon as they saw what was inside. I stood up, rubbing my eyes. Still half asleep, I walked over to see what everyone was looking at. I woke up completely the moment I saw the horrible scene in front of me. Sammy was lying on the kitchen floor, surrounded by a large pool of her own blood. A chunk of her neck had been bitten off by what appeared to be some kind of animal, though I could not imagine what kind. The blood around the wound had already dried and darkened. I could not move. I could only stand there and stare. Her eyes were open, blankly staring off into empty space. Her pupils were nothing more than tiny dots, as if someone had taken an ultra-fine point marker and tapped each iris once. I stood frozen in place, unable to look away. Some of the other kids were screaming around me. A few others ran to the trash can or the bathroom to throw up. I did not feel nauseous, but as my dad told me later, my face had turned pale, almost a ghostly white color. The police arrived eventually. Coroners and detectives examined the scene thoroughly, scanning every inch of the clubhouse up and down, inside and out. They could not find any evidence of what had happened. I watched with tears streaming down my face as they rolled the black body bag out of the building on a stretcher. I looked around at the other kids through my blurred, tear-filled vision. I could barely see anything clearly. I watched as parents quickly took their children home as fast as they could. In all the chaos and confusion, I realized I could not find Darren anywhere. As you might have guessed, I was only 7 years old when all of this happened. I am 20 years old now. My family moved away from that apartment complex not long after Sammy's death. We have been living in a new apartment that is not maintained nearly as well as our old one, but I will take it over the alternative. At least here, I do not have to worry about seeing her again. But then again, maybe I do have to worry. I work the night shift at McDonald's now, and occasionally, when I am standing at the register, I can see someone sitting in a booth by the window next to one of the promotional posters. She is always well dressed and fairly pale. She just sits there staring out into the night. Occasionally, looking around the empty restaurant. And then again, on my bus rides home early in the morning, usually around 3 or 4, I sometimes see things. For just a brief moment, as the bus speeds past, I see someone standing on the sidewalk wearing bright-colored clothing. I swear they glance over at me as we pass by. How could they possibly see me inside the bus when we are moving faster than they could process? And then again, last night. Last night is the reason I am writing this now. It is the one thing out of all these events that made me need to share this story with you. Last night, I went through my normal nightly routine. I brushed my teeth, washed my face, changed into my pajamas, and climbed into bed. I turned off the lamp on my nightstand and lay down in the darkness. Then, nothing. Just complete silence. Then, I heard the occasional cawing of a crow outside my window. Then, I heard something else. Tap, tap, tap. The sound was coming from my bedroom door. Please God, I thought to myself, please do not let it be her. But deep down, I already knew the truth. She had found me again. Story 10. My roommate has disappeared. Now, that might not sound particularly strange at first. She goes out sometimes, stays with her boyfriend for a night or two, goes to parties on the weekends. Her absence is not unusual in itself, but what happened today was different, and it has left me with a creeping sense of unease that I cannot shake. I came back to our dorm room this afternoon after my classes ended. As I walked down the hallway toward our door, I could clearly hear her voice coming from inside. She was talking on her phone, speaking in German, which she does sometimes when calling her family back home. I am not fluent in German, so I could not understand what she was saying, but I recognized her voice immediately. It had that particular tone and rhythm that was distinctly hers. I could also hear another voice responding to her through the phone speaker. It sounded like an older woman, perhaps her mother or grandmother. I pulled my keys from my pocket and approached the door. She was still talking as I slid the key into the lock. I could hear her voice clearly through the door as I turned the key. The lock clicked open. I pushed the door inward and stepped inside. The voice was gone, completely gone. The room was silent. There is a strange moment that happens when your brain is processing multiple sounds at once. Everything gets confused for just a split second. I had heard the mixed sounds of the key turning in the lock and my roommate's voice speaking both at the same time. Then the door unlocked and swung open, and suddenly she was not there. The room was empty. I stood in the doorway for a moment, looking around. Maybe she had moved into the bathroom or her bedroom. Maybe I had somehow heard her voice coming from a different room, and my brain had mistakenly placed it as coming from our main living space. Sound can travel in strange ways in these old dormitory buildings. The acoustics are weird sometimes. I thought nothing more of it at the time. I went about my afternoon, doing homework and making dinner. I assumed she would come back eventually, or that I would get a text from her explaining where she had gone. But she did not come back that night, or the next day, or the day after that. A few days passed with no sign of her. I kept expecting to hear her key in the lock, or to wake up and find her asleep in her bed. But the room remained empty, except for me. Her things were all still there, untouched. Her textbooks sat stacked on her desk. Her jacket hung on the back of her chair. Her shoes were lined up by the door. In our small, shared refrigerator, her salad sat in a plastic container. I watched it slowly wilt over the days, the lettuce turning brown at the edges, the tomatoes getting soft and wrinkled. She had made that salad almost a week ago now. She always made a big salad on Sunday nights to eat throughout the week. This one was barely touched. Yesterday, I was down in the communal kitchen talking to my resident assistant, Thomas. Everyone just calls him Tom. He was cooking something, some sort of Danish dish he said his grandmother used to make. The kitchen was filled with the smell of boiling pasta and some kind of cream sauce he was preparing. I had been sitting at the kitchen table scrolling through my phone for about an hour while he cooked, just keeping him company. I walked up behind him as he stood at the stove stirring a pot of bow tie pasta noodles in boiling water. I asked him casually if he had seen my roommate around lately. I tried to keep my voice light, not wanting to sound too worried or paranoid. Tom turned around to look at me, holding the saucepan of noodles in one hand. His face had a genuinely confused expression. He said the words, "Your roommate," in an incredulous tone, like he had no idea what I was talking about. I nodded and said yes, my roommate Liesel. I told him that surely he had seen her before. We had been living together all semester. Tom still looked completely confused, his eyebrows pulled together. So I continued describing her, thinking maybe he just could not place the name with the face. I told him she had long, light blonde hair that she usually wore down. She wore glasses with thin metal frames. She had freckles scattered across her nose and cheeks. She was from Germany and sometimes spoke with a slight accent. Tom made a small sound of acknowledgement and turned back to the stove. He grabbed the pot and dumped the noodles into a colander he had placed in the sink, steam rising up around his face. He said that he thought I lived alone in that room. I stared at the back of his head in disbelief. Tom was not the smartest person I had ever met. I will admit that. He was not stupid by any means. He got good grades and was studying engineering, but he was terrible at putting two and two together. He had significant problems with his memory. If I told him something, there was a good chance he would forget it within a week. Important dates, conversations we had, plans we made, they all seemed to slip out of his mind easily. But this was different. Tom had definitely met my roommate before. I had seen them talking in this very kitchen on multiple occasions. Tom would give her a fist bump when they passed each other in the hallways. They were friendly. How could he possibly not remember her? I pointed out that he was my resident assistant. Part of his job was knowing who lived in which rooms. How could he not know who my roommate was? Tom shook the colander back and forth, draining the last of the water from the noodles. He said defensively that he had a lot of residents to keep track of. He reminded me that I was not even on his specific hallway, so it was not like he saw me every single day. If I could have seen Tom's face at that moment, I am sure he would have been grinning in that sheepish way he does when he knows he has messed something up. I crossed my arms and said that regardless, I was worried about her. I had not seen Liesel in several days now, and that was not normal for her. Tom fished the noodles out of the colander and plated them in a wide, shallow bowl. Then he reached into his cabinet and pulled out a container of Parmesan cheese, shaking it liberally over the pasta. Not very authentically Danish, after all. I found myself watching his hands as he worked. He had long, thin fingers, and his fingernails were bitten down short, a nervous habit he had. He got out a fork from the silverware drawer and then turned to me. He said lightly that she was probably fine, that I was worrying over nothing. Then he gestured for me to come sit down with him at the table. I sat down across from him, my foot tapping anxiously against the carpet under the table. I said that, yeah, she was probably just staying with her boyfriend for a few days. Maybe they had gone on a trip or something, and she had forgotten to tell me. And that was all the help that Tom provided, which was essentially no help at all. I am not entirely sure what a resident assistant is supposed to do in situations like this. Are they supposed to file some kind of report? Contact campus security? I have no idea. But Tom did absolutely nothing except eat his pasta and tell me not to worry. That interaction would have been completely forgettable, except for one significant detail. Tom had completely forgotten about my roommate's existence. He had forgotten meeting her, talking to her, seeing her around the building. It was like she had been erased from his memory entirely, but it was not like everyone had forgotten about her. That would be truly bizarre. My other friends definitely remembered her. I had complained to them multiple times about little annoying roommate things. How she never turned off the lights at night when she went to bed, leaving me to get up and flip the switch in the dark. How she would spend hours doing her nails, filling our small room with the sharp chemical smell of nail polish until I had to open the windows even in cold weather. My friends remembered all of those complaints. They remembered me talking about Lae'zel, but now that I think about it, none of them had ever actually met her in person. Tom was the only person outside of me who had actually seen her and interacted with her face to face. That realization sent a chill down my spine. But the truly strange thing, the real reason I am writing all of this down and posting it, is what I found this morning under her bed. Lae'zel has one of those beds with long fabric panels hanging down the sides, almost like curtains. They drape all the way to the floor, completely hiding the space underneath the bed frame. You cannot see under her bed at all, unless you physically lift up those fabric panels and look. I woke up very early this morning, much earlier than usual. Something had pulled me out of sleep. At first, I was not sure what it was. Then I smelled it. There was a bad smell in the room, strong and unpleasant. It smelled organic, like an animal smell. As I lay in bed trying to identify where the odor was coming from, I realized it was strongest near Lae'zel's bed. I got up and walked over to her bed slowly. The smell grew stronger with each step. It was definitely coming from under her bed. I reached down and lifted up one of the hanging fabric panels. A dog was under there. I jumped back slightly in surprise. It was not a particularly creepy or frightening dog, just a mutt, a mixed breed with short brown fur and a long pointed nose. The dog was alive. I could see it breathing. It was staring up at me with small, beady eyes. As I stared back at it in shock, I noticed dark stains on the fabric panels. The dog had apparently been marking its territory, spraying the hanging curtains. That explained the smell that had woken me up. Those stains were the only evidence that the dog had been there at all. There were no food bowls, no water, no toys, nothing else that would indicate someone was keeping a pet in our room. The dog continued to stare at me with its long muzzle and dark eyes. There was something unsettling about its gaze, though I could not explain exactly what. I felt an overwhelming urge to just close the curtains and pretend I had not seen anything. So, that is exactly what I did. I dropped the fabric panel back down, hiding the dog from view. Then I immediately pulled out my phone and called campus police. I explained the situation as calmly as I could. There was a dog living under my roommate's bed. I had no idea how it got there or how long it had been there. I needed someone to come and deal with it. The officer I spoke with was surprisingly unhelpful. He advised me to take the dog to an animal shelter or kennel. I explained that I did not have a car, so transporting a dog anywhere would be extremely difficult. He suggested I could call a friend with a car or use a rideshare service. Then he essentially ended the conversation, making it clear this was not something campus police were going to handle. I hung up, feeling frustrated and unsure of what to do next. I stood there for a moment, staring at Liesel's bed. Then I took a deep breath and reached down to lift the fabric panel again. I would need to figure out how to get the dog out from under there if I was going to transport it anywhere. I lifted the curtain. The dog was not there anymore. In its place was a carving of a dog. I bent down to look closer, my heart starting to race. It was definitely a wooden carving. The craftsmanship was strange. The wood had been carved in a way that was simultaneously slick and sharp and soft. There were carefully carved indents where the eyes should be, giving the impression of those same beady eyes that had been staring at me minutes before. The tail hung down as limp as wood could possibly hang, carved to look like it was draped naturally. I reached under the bed with a shaking hand and pulled the carving out. It felt like ordinary wood, cool and smooth under my fingers. I immediately called Thomas. He answered on the fourth ring, his voice thick with sleep. I told him he needed to come to my room right now. Something strange had happened, and I needed him to see it. He arrived about 5 minutes later. When I opened the door for him, his hair was thoroughly mussed up, sticking up in several directions. He had clearly just rolled out of bed and come straight over. He asked in a confused voice if I had really called him over because there was a wooden dog under my roommate's bed. I said yes, but that it was not that simple. I tried to explain what had happened, how it had been a real living dog just minutes ago. Tom walked past me into the room and bent down to look under Liesel's bed himself. He reached under and pulled out the wooden carving. I could swear it had diminished in size somehow. When I had pulled it out, it had been fairly large, maybe the size of a small terrier. Now it fit easily in the palm of Tom's hand. He turned it over, examining it from different angles. He said vaguely that it was weird. He had not known that Liesel liked dogs. I could not help myself. I said sarcastically that last time I checked, he had not even known Liesel existed at all. Tom had the decency to look slightly embarrassed. He just said, "Yeah," quietly. I took the wooden dog carving from his hand and walked over to my desk. I set it down on the surface, positioning it so it faced away from my bed. I did not want to look at it, and that is where the carving sits right now as I write this. I do not like having it in the room. There is something deeply unsettling about it. I feel like I should put it back under Liesel's bed where I found it. She will probably want it when she comes back. It is obviously something that belongs to her. But there is something else now, something that has made me afraid to go near her bed at all. There is something under her covers. I cannot see it clearly in the darkness of the room. The lamp on my desk provides some light, but her bed is in the corner, mostly in shadow, but there is definitely something in her bed. I can see the outline of it under her blankets, something large enough to create a significant shape under the covers, and it is completely unmoving. I have been watching it for the past 20 minutes as I have been typing this. It has not moved at all, not even the slight movement of breathing. I do not know what to do. I do not know if I should call Tom again. I do not know if I should call the police. I do not know if I should just leave the room and not come back. But I cannot stop staring at that unmoving shape in Liesel's bed, and I cannot shake the horrible feeling that whatever is under those covers is not my roommate. Story 11. It was several years ago when the Butler family first arrived in Ballydara. Being newcomers from outside our small town, it naturally took some time for us locals to grow accustomed to their presence among us. But that adjustment period passed more quickly than usual. They were genuinely good people, the sort that any community would be lucky to have. The kind of family that attended church services every Sunday morning without fail. Their children never caused trouble at school and were praised by all their teachers. The parents got along wonderfully with everyone they met and seemed to fit right into the social fabric of our town. Having traveled extensively throughout Ireland, visiting towns and villages in both the Republic and Northern Ireland, the Butler family had accumulated countless stories to share about the various places they had lived. Mr. Butler quickly became something of a beloved figure around town. He had a wonderful sense of humor and took great delight in making merry jokes, often poking fun at his distinctive golden-rimmed spectacles that he wore perched on his nose. Mrs. Butler became a regular volunteer at the local church, always ready to help with whatever needed doing. Their 2 children were genuinely well loved by their teachers and classmates alike. Despite all of this, despite how well they seemed to integrate into Ballydara life, they never truly became part of the deeper community. There remained an invisible barrier between them and those of us whose families had lived here for generations. This distance can be directly attributed to their attitude towards our local legends and the warnings that came with them. Ballydara is located out west in County Donegal, far removed from the noise and bustle of Ireland's cities. Our small town is flanked on all sides by rolling green hills. On one particular hill that rises just outside the town limits, there grows a collection of ancient ring forts. These earthwork structures are incredibly old, their origins stretching back into the mists of prehistory, long predating the founding of Ballydara itself by countless centuries. We folk of Ballydara have whispered among ourselves for generations that Na Dawin Side, the fairy folk, claim ownership of those lands. And why should we not believe this? Is it not true that on certain nights, particularly around the old festival days, the most hauntingly beautiful singing and music can be heard drifting down from those mounds? Do we not regularly see strange lights hanging suspended over those ancient earthworks, bobbing up and down in the darkness as though they were lanterns carried by dancers? Do not weary travelers passing by those hills late at night sometimes report hearing a woman's voice calling out to them, beckoning them to come closer? And have not more than a few reckless souls emboldened by drink or youthful bravado ventured up to visit those mounds, only to never return home to their families? These things have been happening since the days of my grandfather's grandfather and his grandfather's grandfather before him. For long generations, stretching back into memory, we Ballydara folk have maintained a respectful distance from those mounds. We do not set foot upon them. We do not disturb them. We leave them be. Nonetheless, despite our caution and our warnings, Those hills have found themselves hosting all manner of outsiders over the years. Foreigners, travelers, wanderers, amateur folklorists, all of them interested in our legends, but stubbornly dismissive of our warnings. They come, they investigate, and sometimes they learn too late why we locals stay away. The Butler family, I am sorry to say, proved no exception to this pattern. It happened one evening at the old pub in the center of town. Mr. Butler was sitting at the bar speaking with several men who had become his friends since his arrival in Ballydara. The conversation had turned to his farming endeavors. He was discussing the land he had purchased for his farm, talking about the new crops he had been experimenting with growing. But whenever he looked out across his property, his gaze was inevitably drawn to those nearby hills, and he found himself wondering who owned them and whether he might be able to purchase them to expand his farming operation. His friends, good men who had grown fond of Mr. Butler, stopped drinking their beers mid-sip. They shifted uneasily on their stools, exchanging concerned glances with one another. One of them asked carefully if he was referring to the hills where the ancient mounds stood. Mr. Butler confirmed that yes, those were exactly the hills he meant. His friends immediately tried to dissuade him from this notion. They explained, as patiently as they could, that those hills were already occupied, that no amount of money would ever persuade their current residents to vacate, and that he would be far better served finding some other field to purchase for his expansion plans. They tried to make him understand without outright saying what they meant, hoping he would take the hint. But Mr. Butler was not having any of it. He was a practical man, a modern man, someone who believed only what his own eyes could verify. And in all his travels throughout Ireland, he had never once seen Nadaween sea day, not in Galway, not in Dublin, not in Belfast, and certainly not here in Little Ballydara. As far as he was concerned, these were simply superstitions, old wives' tales that should have died out generations ago. His friends continued trying to convince him to exercise caution, to not stir up trouble over nothing. But the seed of an idea had already taken root in Mr. Butler's mind, and there was no digging it out now. After that visit to the pub, he returned home and immediately began making phone calls, determined to track down whoever held the deed to those lands. After several days of fruitless searching through property records and making inquiries with various offices, he was nearly ready to admit defeat. Then, quite unexpectedly, his phone rang one evening. The voice on the other end belonged to a man who identified himself as the current proprietor of those hills. He asked if Mr. Butler was still interested in purchasing the land. Mr. Butler eagerly confirmed that yes, he was absolutely still interested. He assured the man that he had more than sufficient funds to meet whatever asking price might be proposed. You can imagine his considerable surprise then, when the negotiation concluded and he discovered that the land cost far less than he had budgeted for. In fact, he had prepared far too much money, which should have struck him as unusual for such a large tract of land. But he was so pleased with his bargain that he did not stop to question why the price was so remarkably low. With the property now legally his, Mr. Butler wasted no time. He immediately began placing advertisements in surrounding towns, promising good wages to anyone willing to come work on those hills. His plan was straightforward enough. All he needed was to have some sturdy fences erected around the perimeter and along key divisions of the property, and then he would have ample space to raise substantial flocks of sheep and herds of cattle. Now, you will usually find that for any job and any price, someone will eventually step forward willing to do the work. Money talks, as they say. But there was not a single man or woman in all of Ballydara, nor for several miles in any direction, who would agree to set foot on those hills, regardless of how much money was offered. The locals simply would not do it. Eventually, after exhausting all local options, Mr. Butler was forced to hire a construction crew from outside the province, workers who had no knowledge of our local traditions and warnings. They set to work building the fences with professional efficiency. But from the very beginning, strange things began to happen that tested even their skepticism. Some mornings, the crew would arrive at the work site only to discover that the wooden fence posts and lengths of barbed wire they had installed the previous day were now lying neatly on the ground. The posts had been pulled up, and the holes they had been driven into were filled back in with fresh, undisturbed grass, as though the work had never been done at all. It looked less like vandalism and more like the land itself was rejecting their efforts. During the nights, crew members who stayed in temporary accommodations near the site complained of hearing disturbing noises outside their windows. The sound of small children laughing in the darkness, though no children lived anywhere nearby. The terrible screaming of foxes that seemed to go on for hours. One worker even swore on his mother's grave that he had seen a woman dressed in a long white gown, seeming not to walk across the ground, but to float above it, her feet never touching the earth. This particular man was so thoroughly startled and frightened by what he had witnessed that he refused to ever return to the worksite. He packed his belongings that very night and left, not even waiting to collect his final wages. This left his co-workers suddenly short-handed, forcing Mr. Butler to scramble to find a replacement. Mr. Butler hired a new fellow to join the crew, a young man who had recently come down from Belfast, looking for work. This Belfaster, as everyone began calling him, was quite good-looking, and more than a few of the young women in town were openly swooning over him. One or two of the young men as well, though they were more discreet about it. But nobody on the work crew was swooning over the Belfaster. This was his first real job, and he was not exactly what anyone would describe as a diligent or conscientious worker. He spent more time slacking off than actually working. He made inappropriate jokes at inappropriate times. He constantly distracted the other workers when they were trying to focus on their tasks. The crew began lodging complaints about him with increasing frequency. But Mr. Butler, who had already invested a substantial amount of money into this entire venture, simply told them to ignore it and get on with the work. He was not about to start over again with yet another new hire. One particular workday, the crew was out by the fence line, working to secure the posts deep into the ground. The Belfaster was using a drill to attach wire to one of the fence posts when he suddenly stopped working. He set down his tools and turned to face the nearest ring fort, an ancient, half-collapsed structure covered in thick grass. The other workmen noticed him standing motionless and asked what was wrong. The Belfaster said, quite seriously, that he had just heard someone calling his name from over near that ring fort. It had been a woman's voice, he said, soft, airy, and sultry. None of the other workers had heard anything at all, so they told him irritably to stop mucking about and to get back to work. Only a few minutes passed before the Belfaster stopped working again. Once more, he turned to face the ring fort, his expression troubled. This time, he insisted that he had definitely heard the woman calling to him again, and now she was begging for him to come and see her, to come closer to the mound. The other workmen were losing their patience now. They told him sharply to stop his joking around and to knock it off. The Belfaster swore he was not joking, that he genuinely heard this voice, but the crew would not hear any more of it. All they wanted was for him to shut his mouth and do his job. Another few minutes of work passed in tense silence. Then the Belfaster suddenly jumped as though he had been shocked, spinning around to face the ring forts once again. This time, he swore that the woman was calling his name very clearly now, whispering all sorts of lovely, enticing things to him, promising him pleasures if he would only come to her. One of the other workmen had finally had enough. He was about ready to physically strike the Belfaster to shut him up, when he stopped abruptly, his face draining of all color until he was white as a sheet. In a shaking voice, he said that he had just heard it too, a woman's voice saying his name, long and low, unmistakable. Now the other workmen were beginning to feel genuinely uneasy. This was no longer a joke or one man's overactive imagination. They all set down their tools and decided to investigate the ring fort together. Safety in numbers, as they say. They searched every single inch of that ancient structure, from the top of the mound to the bottom, looking into every shadow and behind every clump of grass. They found absolutely nothing and no one. When they finally gave up the search and returned to where they had been working on the fence, they discovered something that sent chills down all their spines. All of their tools had vanished. Every single hammer, drill, coil of wire, everything gone without a trace. The foreman of the crew immediately called Mr. Butler on his mobile phone. In a blunt, no-nonsense tone, he informed Mr. Butler that they would not be completing their work on this site. He explained exactly what had happened, leaving out no details. Mr. Butler was absolutely furious when he heard this news. That evening at the pub, he ranted and raved to anyone who would listen about all these silly old superstitions that should have died out long ago in this modern age. He was absolutely convinced that this was not the work of Nadawin Sidhe, but rather the work of hooligans and vandals, probably teenagers from town playing pranks. He had gone to the local guard to report the theft and vandalism, but they had not found any evidence of suspicious individuals in the area. Frankly, they had more important matters to attend to than searching for some missing construction tools. This only made Mr. Butler angrier. Finally, in frustration, he announced loudly to everyone in the pub that he would go up to those mounds himself the very next night. He would stay there and catch whoever had been sabotaging his work with his own two hands. And if anyone present was brave enough to accompany him, he would personally pay them 100 euros each for their trouble. Not a single person took him up on that offer. No matter how much money was being offered, there are simply some things that no sane person will do. For the people of Balidara, visiting those mounds at night was definitely one of those things. Mr. Butler searched throughout the entire town, going door to door, but not a single soul would accept his offer. His friends tried once more to convince him to abandon this foolish plan, but he stubbornly refused to listen to reason. Cursing them all for their cowardice and superstition, he went to see if anyone from the work crew might be willing to accompany him. The only person who agreed was the Belfaster. Perhaps he was motivated by the money. Perhaps he wanted to prove his bravery. Perhaps the voice he had heard calling to him had planted something in his mind. Whatever his reasons, he agreed to go. Mr. Butler's plan was simple. They would sit up in the mounds overnight with torches and a camera. When whoever was stealing from him showed up, they would catch them in the act, document it, and bring the evidence before the guard. For his loyal assistance, the Belfaster would be paid €200. On that particular night, several people in Ballydara did notice strange lights up on the mounds, but these were not the dancing, bobbing lights that were usually seen there. These lights were stationary and still, like old-fashioned street lamps burning with a harsh white glow. No music was heard drifting down from the hills that night. No singing, no birds calling, not even the screaming of foxes. Only the mournful crying of the cold wind sweeping across the empty fields. When her husband did not return home the following morning, Mrs. Butler became extremely anxious. By midday, when there was still no sign of him, she asked several of her friends from the church if they would be willing to go up to the mounds to see what might be wrong. Now, her friends were sensible, practical people, and, like all sensible people, they were not about to turn away a frightened woman in distress. Old legends be damned. So a small group of them gathered their courage and made their way up to the mounds together. What they discovered there would haunt them for the rest of their lives. They found the Belfaster first. He was huddled against a tree, shivering violently despite the mild weather. His shirt had been torn completely open, hanging in tatters from his shoulders. But it was his eyes that were most disturbing. They were wild, rolling in his head like those of a rabid animal, completely devoid of reason or recognition. When he saw the women approaching through the grass, he opened his mouth and screamed. It was not a scream of fear or pain, but the mindless shrieking of a lunatic who had lost all grip on sanity. He scrambled to his feet and tore away from them, running wildly out into the open field, still screaming. The guard caught up with him several hours later, still running and gibbering absolute nonsense, words that made no sense strung together randomly. He was taken directly to a hospital for psychiatric evaluation. As far as I have been told, he remains institutionalized there to this day, his mind never having recovered from whatever he experienced that night. As for Mr. Butler himself, he was nowhere to be found. There was not a single trace of him anywhere on those hills. A large and extensive search operation was organized immediately. Every able-bodied person in Ballydara joined in the effort, determined to find their missing neighbor. They combed through every single inch of the surrounding land. Mr. Butler's friends, overcoming their fear of the mounds, even searched through the ring forts themselves, calling his name, looking in every possible hiding place. Other volunteers searched as far as the distant bogs, thinking perhaps he had wandered off in the dark and fallen in. The search continued for months. Volunteers came from every corner of Ireland to help, for Mr. Butler had made many friends during his travels, and news of his disappearance had spread widely. The guard deployed their best sniffer dogs, animals specially trained to track missing persons. Those dogs kept returning again and again to the mounds. Several of them even began trying to dig beneath the earthworks, as though they sensed something buried there. But despite all this extensive effort, despite the hundreds of people searching and the trained animals, not a single piece of evidence was ever recovered, not even a shoe or a scrap of clothing. I am deeply saddened to say that Mrs. Butler and her children were eventually forced to move away from Ballydara. The memories were simply too painful. The loss too close and raw. Every time they looked out their window and saw those hills, they were reminded of the husband and father they had lost. They relocated to another part of Ireland, where they continued to live comfortably off the money that Mr. Butler had accumulated during his successful business ventures. But money is all they have left of him now, and money is a poor substitute for a loved one. There is one final addition to this tale that I feel compelled to share. Several years after Mr. Butler vanished, a pair of tourists came to visit Ballydara. They had read about the mysterious disappearance online and were interested in seeing the famous mounds where a man had gone missing. I suppose this is something we shall have to put up with now, our tragedy becoming a curiosity for outsiders. When these two tourists went to visit the mounds, one of them was walking along the outer edge of a ring fort when she felt her foot step on something hard beneath the grass. Perplexed, she bent down to investigate. Partially buried in the earth, sticking up as though it had been vomited out by the ground itself, was a pair of spectacles. Gold-rimmed spectacles, unmistakable in their design. When the tourists turned these spectacles in to the local guard station, they were collected and catalogued as evidence. But the case was not reopened. Mr. Butler remains officially missing to this day, and those spectacles sit in an evidence locker somewhere, the only trace that he was ever on those hills at all. We Ballydara folk know better than to ask too many questions about what happened that night. We know that some answers are better left undiscovered. The mounds have stood for thousands of years, and they will stand for thousands more, and we will continue to give them the respectful distance they demand.